Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today it's all about the letters and words, because you'll be trying to make the best words with the letters you have, people swindling letters from you, and the dice sometimes forcing you to share. You'll be building a personal crossword style grid of words with letter tiles and trying to have the most points in the end. Word Hustle is a strategic game of crosswords for 1 to 4 players for ages 10 and up, takes 20 to 35 minutes to play, and is published by People for Goldfish. It's on Kickstarter right now, and I'm going to show you how the game works, and I'll see you on the other side. Now this is a Kickstarter preview, so all the art and components you see here are prototype. You're going to want to check the Kickstarter link in the description of this video to see all the final art and components, and I'll try to point out some things that I'm aware of as this video goes on of some of the final things. Word Hustle is played over 3 rounds. Each round you're going to be creating words from letters into a crossword grid and trying to score the most points. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to get 7 letters, but they're going to be choosing these from an open draft. Players will be selecting a certain amount of letters, going in clockwise order, but you'll end up with 7 of them to begin the game. Now over those 3 rounds, each round goes through 3 phases. The first phase is rolling dice, where each player, one at a time, will roll these dice. And when they roll the dice, a few things are going to happen. Number 1, the gold die here is going to go here. This is sort of locked after the first roll. Now a few things about the dice. The final dice are going to be etched dice. Now this one you see this gold die here. Now this gold die is actually going to be an acrylic die, but there'll be a limited 24 karat plated die reward level for it as well, and it will look like this. Now with these dice here, you can keep the ones you like and re-roll the other ones. So let's say I kept these and I re-rolled those 2. And let's say that's what I rolled. Now again, you can still keep any of these and re-roll for a last, a third roll for the round. So let's say we kept this and re-rolled again. And let's say this is what we ended up with. So we'll take these dice and we'll place it all in this row right here. Now let's first go over this. Now here, if you have at least 2 of them, you'll get 1 letter tile for each of those rolled that way from the bag. So if you had just 2 of them, you'd get 2 letters, but if you have 3 of them, you'll get 3 letters. Now if you only get 1, you don't get anything. So in this case, we rolled 3 of these, so we get 3 letters from the bag. Now, not only does this bag work to hold all of the letters inside it, it also acts as sort of a travel way to, travel with the game, where it has that Velcro in there. And then in there, you can place the different components, the dice, the pads, and things like that. So you could easily travel with this game if you didn't want to travel with it in the box. So I simply would have added those letters randomly from the bag to my supply. Now for this icon, if you have a set of 2 of those, all players, including the ones that roll, get to draw 1 tile from the bag. Now in this case, everyone had done that. It's called share, and we pretty much activated all these dice. If you end up getting 3 of these red ones, you get to essentially steal any tile from an opponent. But now once I've locked all this in, then I will pass this to the next player clockwise. They will roll the dice, have up to 3 total rolls, keeping the ones they want, and doing the same thing. You can continue doing this in this rolling dice phase until all players have finished rolling. Then you move to the next phase. Now in phase 2, you're essentially building words, but all players are doing it in front of themselves using their own letters simultaneously. Now you're creating sort of a crossword, and you're trying to make sure that you use acceptable words. And unacceptable words are ones that are misspelled, or words that are always capitalized, like proper nouns, people, places. You can't use any abbreviations. You can't use words, requiring a hyphen or apostrophe. And you can only use, use these words now. In a future round, you can't use these words again. However, you can use the same word in the same round in this, same grid, if you can make that work. But when you think you're done, you can flip this 1-minute timer. At that point, the player who flipped this timer cannot touch their grid anymore, and everyone else has 1 minute. You can also play without this timer if you want it to be a little less stressful. Then, once that timer runs out, or everyone's decided that the round's over if they're not using the timer, you go into the 3rd phase, which is reviewing the words. And that's when other players each kind of look at everyone else's grids, and they look to review it to see if they might possibly want to challenge. Now they can challenge for any of the reasons I spoke about earlier, but let's say someone challenges this word lay here, and they're like, I don't think this is a word, or it's not spelled right. If they decide to challenge you, look it up, and you can use whatever reference you decide at the beginning of the game, but Merriam-Webster is always a good one, and lay is a grassland or pasture, and it is spelled correctly, so we were challenged and we succeeded through that challenge. And in this case, we would get to steal a letter from that player that challenged us, but not until after the words are scored. Now, if they challenged and this was an unacceptable word, meaning the challenge was correct, we would gain no points for that word and we'd lose 5 points from this at the end of the round. Now, once all the players are done reviewing, then we go to the end of the round and we write down the words and we score things. And you'd score this by writing down your word, and you'd look at the amount of tiles that the word was and get a specific amount of points. And I want to point out that in this game, whether you have a word that's 7 or more letters, it's always the same amount of points. And that stops players that know these really long words having advantage of you in this game. Now, however, you only get this 20 points for a word that long if all your other words are correct, meaning you have no unacceptable words in your grid. So here we have the words that I wrote. We looked at this, we'll see how many points there are. Now you notice I had a red tile. Those are the really hard ones like J, Q, and Z and such. If you're able to put that in there, you'd get 5 points. But any unused tiles like the J and the V are minus points. So I would add these up, I'd minus any of these minuses, add in any of these extras, and I'd get a first round points. In this case, I have 16, which essentially is the 18 points for my words minus the 2 points for the letters unused. Now, since the game's not over because it's 3 rounds, players would disassemble their grids, but they'd keep these letters because you're going to sort of add to them, and some letters might get stolen, as we showed you earlier. But you'll break this up, but these are still your letters, and you'll go back to the rolling phase. And the player who has the highest score would start, and then it would go clockwise because, you know, the one that has the most points is the most susceptible of being stolen from and things like that. So then you go through a second round of rolling dice, gaining letters, possibly getting stolen from, and then creating your words. And then scoring them, possibly getting challenged or challenging others like before. And here I have 29 points. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier is that the words always have to go either left to right and up and down. They can't go down to up or right to left. Another cool thing to point out is that these tiles, they're double-sided. They have the same letter on both, so you don't have to worry about how you take them up. When they come down, you never have to flip the tiles over. And when you're done with the second round, you do it all again one more time. So at the end of the third round, it might look something like this in front of me. Now I want to point out that earlier I used the word root. I can't use root again, but I can use something that has a suffix like rooted, for example. And I used 2 with red letters, but I did have a bunch of them left over. So I added up all these points and I ended up with 91 points. Now at the end of the game, there's this thing called the ultimate hustle. This is where the second place player may choose the hustle for the win. Now let's say we won with 91. The second place player would take all of the letters that I have at the end of here, and they try to make their own, but they can't use any word that this player has made the entire game. They're trying to score higher than my third round total score. In this case, 46. And if they're able to do that, then they will become the winner. And this is a unique part of this game that can make the endings exciting. And if you're using a timer in the game, they have 2 minutes instead of 1 to do this. Now there is a solo version of the game which can be a replacement for the morning crossword. And at the beginning of the game, you put the 4 red tiles in the center of the table. Then you randomly draw 14 tiles from the bag, place them in front of you, set a 1-minute timer, and you have 1 minute to draft 7 tiles of the 14. Now the 7 you selected you'll be using, the 7 you didn't are out of the game. Now in the rolling dice phase, for each set of the people side, you get to take a letter from the bag, and you get to add a letter from the bag to the actual center of the table. And if you roll 3 of the red booms, you get to steal any 1 letter from the center of the table. Now at the end of the round, you'll still lose 1 point for every unused tile, but these must get thrown back into the bag. And you'll review and check your work against a dictionary, and at the end of the 3 rounds, you total your score and you see how you did. Hustler, Super Hustler, or Ultimate Hustler. You can also play a 2-player variant where instead of playing 3 rounds, you play 6 rounds, and in the Ultimate Hustle at the end, they get 4 minutes to try to outscore them instead of just the usual 2. There's also variants for playing with children where kids will score 5 points for words of 2, 3, and 4. Instead of 2, 3, and 5, they score 5 for all of it. And if an adult draws an S, it goes to the child that has the smallest score at that point. But at least the adult gets to draw a tile to replace the S. And that's pretty much all the different ways to play Word Hustle. Well, there you have Word Hustle, and as I showed in the overview, it's a twist on word games that has a faster pace than Scrabble, but slower than Bananagrams. And if you'd like to see the final art and components and all the different pledge levels available, you can click the link below me in the description of this video, and it will take you directly to the Kickstarter project page, and I'm sure that People for Goldfish would love your support.